So we will need to, we had no action, it was information only, and so we will need a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn special meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned. It is 5:35. And we will race right off to the next one. So welcome to our Board of Education workshop, which we have the first Monday evening of each month. Our mission, Raymond School District, is dedicated to providing a child-centered learning environment, expecting all students to learn and succeed. We commit to providing and utilizing a progressive, relevant curriculum, encouraging all students to become responsible citizens prepared to meet the challenges of the future. This meeting is a meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's updates, planning, learning, and is not to be considered a public board meeting that conducts school district business. This meeting is now called to order. It is 5:36. Please rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance with me.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. We have roll call of attendance, please.
Audrey Kostick,
Here.
Patty Wren,
Here.
Ed Robinson,
Here.
Janelle Wise,
Here.
Mike Powers.
He's absent excused and maybe online. In fact, I'm back online now, so he should be here shortly.
Thank you, Alan. Verification of public notice pursuant to 19.841 Wisconsin statutes.
The meeting was posted in all the usual spots on the schoolhouse doors, eVergent, Village Hall, online, and media were notified.
Okay, so we move on to the workshop part of this meeting, and our topics for learning and discussion in this meeting are budget and school finance 101, and that will be presented by Pete Kempen and Mike Leach. And the second part will be referendum planning and our communication plans. So, take it away.
All right, so my name's Pete Kempen. I am the interim business manager until June. And one of the things that I was charged with was to try and educate the board on budget and school finance. School finance is not an easy topic to understand and is very different than private sector or even other public sector from what I've been told. So basically I put together a slide PowerPoint and we'll go over some of the basics, and if you have any questions, please ask as we go along. So school budgeting is done in fund accounting, and what that means is that each specific revenue and expenditure has a bucket that it has to go into or come out of. So and they're all grouped in groups of 10. So WUFR, which is the Wisconsin Universal Financial Accounting, no, I'm gonna try that again. I even pulled it up just for that reason. Wisconsin Uniform Financial Accounting Requirements. There we go. But they are in groups of 10. So you got Fund 10, which is the general fund. Fund 20s, which are special project funds, and we use two of those. We use Fund 21, which is a special revenue trust or a donations account, and then Fund 27, which is special education. The 30s, which are debt service funds, so Fund 38 is a non-referendum fund, so that is any debt that is incurred without a referendum, for example, our state trust fund. Or Fund 39, which is incurred by a referendum, and that can be an issue debt or a operational debt. We'll get to that later as well. Fund 40 is capital projects fund. There's a Fund 46 that you can invest in. In my prior district, we had a Fund 46 that can be used for capital improvements. That is typically done once the fund balance is at a stable amount. Then if you have excess, you can invest it, and in 5 years, then use it for capital projects. Fund 50 is our food service fund. Fund 60 is a custodial fund. That does not have anything to do with maintenance. That does have to do with being able to control the funds that are in there. Typically in a high school, this is where your student club and activities would have been. But about 3 years ago, GASB changed it, so now nothing is typically in Fund 60. It all got moved to Fund 21. Fund 70 are trust funds. Fund 80 is a community service fund. So if we had community education, or some schools will use Fund 80 for middle school athletics, we do not currently use Fund 80. And Fund 90 is a package of cooperative program fund. We don't use those either. So basically at Raymond, Fund 10, 21, 27, 38, and 50 to a point. And the rest of them are not used. And you'll be quizzed on that later.
With notes.
Can I ask a question on Fund 80? Is that funded by extra taxation?
Yep, and we will get to that.
Okay. Sorry.
Go, you're fine. You're just ahead of the pack. How come it's not showing now? See, I can like proof it up. It is in present mode. There we go. All right, so Fund 10. No, it's not slides, it's the PDF, but that's right. So Fund 10 is the general fund. This is the biggest one of all of them. This is where general operational costs come out, payroll and benefits for regular education staff, and the reason I'm separating that is because special education staff are paid out separately out of Fund 27. Administration would be in this one, as well as other teachers, aides that are not special education identified. Supplies come out of Fund 10, maintenance, professional development, any technology costs in the district, field trips, extracurriculars, and the Fund 27 transfer. We'll get to that in a minute, but Fund 27 again is the special education fund. And that has to be at a zero balance at the end of the year, so any extra money that is spent on special education comes out of Fund 10. Fund 21 is the donations fund. So it's a donation account. Any gifts that come into the district would come into Fund 21 and allocated for a specific purpose. And as I said, typically the school groups are in here. Student council is a Fund 21. Close-up DC, which is the DC trip, is held in Fund 21. 8th grade graduation, because school money does not go towards these events. They are separately held. Fund 27 is the special education fund. So this is where we will pay our special education teachers and aides, any resources and supplies that are specific to special education students will come out of Fund 27. If it's something that benefits both special ed and regular ed, it has to come out of Fund 10. So this is specifically for Fund 20, or for special education students only. Special education training of staff, any off-site education, if we have a student at a off-site, that is not open enrollment. That would be specific to that child's individual educational plan. These costs can be reimbursed up to 30% from the state. That is up for discussion in this year's budget. There has been talk from the legislature that they're looking to increase that amount, but as of right now and this year, we get approximately 30% of our costs back in aid. And Fund 27 must balance, so any costs that come in over and above the revenue that comes in Fund 27 has to come out of Fund 10 at the end of the year.
Now, that revenue, it used to be on our tax bill that special ed was broke up separate.
Okay?
I don't believe it is anymore.
No, it is not.
So how do you decide how much of that the tax dollars comes out, goes under the special ed?
Whatever it takes to run spec ed. That is, that you are obligated to
Fund it.
fund it.
Okay.
Fund 38 is debt service without referendum. So this is the state trust fund loan that we took out, the 300,000 and the 600,000, and then the interest payments that are on those. So that does not come out of Fund 10, that does come out of a separate fund, and that separate fund is levied separately at the annual meeting and when you approve the budget in October. Fund 39 is with referendum, so a vote has to be approved by the community in order for Fund 39 to exist. It can be an operational referendum, recurring and non-recurring. So we are doing a non-recurring referendum in April. It can also be an issue debt for construction. So if you were to build a building or remodel or anything along those lines, that debt would be in Fund 39 and that fund only. Fund 46 is a long-term capital improvement trust fund. So you invest money in this fund to use later, and it can be invested so that it grows. Typically you'll work with a financial advisor to grow that money, and then you can use that money for any capital improvements later on. We do have one started now with $100. It was closed 2 years ago, but now we have restarted it. I think it was last year that it was restarted, but you have to wait 5 years from the start in order to use it, which honestly we're not in a position now because we need to grow our fund balance first. Fund 50 is the food service fund. So anything associated with food service will come out of Fund 50. That's not only the personnel, but also the cost for the foods and supplies, the equipment. We are in agreement with other districts to work with Taher as far as our food service contractor. And Yorkville is actually the director of this fund, so Raymond itself does not have a Fund 50.
Also note that this year with Fund 50, we are looking to go out to RFP, request for purchase. So looking at services for food service every 3 years, we're obligated to do so. We are choosing to do so. So Taher, if they stay as our food service, would have to rebid their services to our school district as part of the consortium agreement. And then the refrigerator and the cooler would come out of Fund 50 because, again, we provide as the prep kitchen. For example, when we were off of school a couple of weeks ago, on Thursday and Friday we had conferences and then we had a day off. They were here working full time because the other schools in the area that they serve, some of them had school. So they still produce food. And it's also where Data Wrangler comes in because we're on the hook for all the energy consumption when we didn't even have school. So now we're looking at, can there be a shared portion of Fund 50 that covers our electrical, plumbing, and usage, because we're making food for other people at our cost. We haven't had a metering system to date, so Data Wrangler is that system now. We've had some initial reads, and we'll go into that at a future meeting, but it's been positive so far because we're starting to figure out and clean up the lines of who pays for what. So.
And the final fund I'm going to talk about is Fund 80, which is a community service fund. This is for community service activities and expenses. All community residents need to be able to participate in that activity if you're going to use Fund 80. This has been used for middle school athletics, for example, because homeschool students can participate. I've heard of districts doing it for band classes because homeschool students would come in and participate in band. Any community education programs, anything of that sort, but it has to be community in nature. And if you misuse it, you are penalized by DPI. And they have actually cut down on the number of allowable expenses out of Fund 80 in the past few years. Fund balance. hot topic for Raymond as our fund balance has gone down considerably. Fund balance does not equal cash. What it is it's an equation of assets minus liabilities. So even though cash is one of the largest assets that the district has, it does not mean that all of the fund balance is actually cash. Each fund does have a balance at the end of the fiscal year in June, so we run a fiscal year that runs from July 1 through June 30th. And at June 30th, that's when the snapshot is taken as to what our balances are. So that's where our fund balance comes into play at June 30th at the end of each year. Fund 27, as I said, is required to be a zero balance. So if there's anything owed in Fund 27, Fund 10 has to cover that expense. So according to DPI, a district with an appropriate fund balance can do these things. They can avoid interest cost and time lost associated with borrowing. They can make special purchases or cover unforeseen expenditure needs. And they can lower debt issuance costs and preserve or enhance its bond rating by demonstrating financial stability. So here is an example, and this is not Raymond, so this is not accurate for our district right now, but you can see how a fund balance can change month to month. In July and August, typically schools will have decent amounts. It drops down October, November. The low point typically is the end of November, and then it goes back up as revenues are received, and then drops again at the end of May. Typically the second week in June is the lowest point, and then again goes back up, and it cycles like that. So that's why a strong fund balance is important, because there are dips and valleys in the cash flow system throughout a school year, and I'll explain why in a couple minutes.
So, Pete, one of the things we've talked about with our short-term borrowing is August is an interesting month, because August actually is a month we're receiving revenue from this school year, but we won't be receiving it until August. So
Correct.
The school year is done, the fiscal year is done, because June 30th is the end of our fiscal year, yet we're still receiving funds.
Correct. So as this slide shows, expenditures are pretty constant throughout the year. We pay salaries, we pay fringe benefits, and that's typically about 80 to 85% of our budget, and that's done every month throughout the year. So teachers in this district are paid June, July, and August. I've been in districts where teachers get a large check in the middle of June that carries them through the summer. There are districts that allow teachers to take it in 19 payments so that they don't get summer checks. So there's options there. But in Raymond, we do pay them in June, July, and August, so it is pretty consistent throughout the year. Revenues, though, are received, like Mike said, throughout the year. So our tax levy is received, the first payment we get for the school year is in January. Then we get another payment in February, another payment in in April, and then we get our last payment for the previous school year in August. So that is the key as to why districts need to short-term borrow, because they don't have the funds at the beginning of the year to pay for all their bills, because we get paid 6 months after things have occurred. Equalization aid is similar. We get 15% of that in September, 25% in December, 25% in March, and then 35% at the end of the year. Special education aid is a little more predictable. We get 15% 5 months in the middle of the year, and then the balance in June. And all per pupil aid comes in March. So again, notice we do not receive revenue in July. August, we get last year's balance of tax money. September, we get 15% of our equalization aid. We get nothing in October, and then a little bit in November, which is why the end of November is one of our lowest points for cash balance. Any questions on this? All right, so graphically you can see red is the receipts that we get. So there's this spike in August when we get last year's tax payment, and then we get a little bit of money in December, a lot more in February and March, and then the big one in June. Now that June 17 to 30 is the kicker because, like I said, a number of districts will pay their teachers the first payroll in June, which is typically June 15th, and the rest of the money comes typically June 18th to the 20th. So there's like 5 days in there you got to play with. So for example, in my previous district, we would short-term borrow for 5 days. So we would borrow, we would use it, we'd get the money, we'd pay the loan back in 5 days. And they knew that was happening.
But now Raymond's doesn't peak like that.
Yes, it does.
Isn't that
Well,
primarily due to the big payments?
Somewhat, correct. And so your last 4 would be a little more even, but there's still payments at the end of the fiscal year that need to be made. It's not, yeah, correct, Ed, it is not that spiked. It's a little more flat. Good point. Okay. So in summary, again, fund balance does not mean it's cash, it's assets minus liabilities. And again, cash is an asset, but that doesn't mean that the fund balance is all cash. It's not all liquid. District fund balance levels change daily, and fund balance is reported as a June 30th snapshot. Each district has a fund balance level appropriate to them. There is no one size fits all. Some districts have 20% fund balance, some are almost 100% fund balance. They have their fund balance equal to their revenue and expenditures throughout the year. But no matter what, we should be able to follow policy, and right now we are not following policy with our fund balance, which is why we need to go to referendum. Any questions on that?
Back up to that back slide, would you please? So, assets isn't necessarily cash.
No, a
What
large
else is
amount of
made
it is cash.
Yeah. What else is it made up of?
It could be money that's coming in later, deferred revenue. So like the August tax payment is an asset.
Oh, okay.
Liabilities would include the payroll that we have to pay out in July and August.
So at the end of the day, it's still cash, kind of.
Yeah. Can I take questions from the audience?
It's your show.
Go ahead.
What happens to Raymond State Aid next year if it overspends or increases spending in any given year?
I'll get there.
Okay.
All right, revenue limits. So in 1993-94, the state enacted revenue limits to control the amount of revenue a school district can collect. And they limit the state general aids, which include equalization aid, special adjustment aid. Chapter 220 is the Milwaukee voucher program. High poverty aid, which we are not able to collect. Aid for exempt computer property and personal property that we get every year. And then local property taxes. Those are the 2 that are under revenue limits. General aids and property taxes. So think of it as a pie. You have a pie. You can only fill that pie so much. There's 2 things that go into it. There's state aid and there's local taxes. So the more state aid you get, the less property tax you have to levy for. In Raymond, we levy 64% of our revenue as taxes and 36% is state aid. The reason it's that it has that disparity is because as a district, we are considered to be property rich. So that means for every dollar we spend, we get about 36 cents back in aid. My previous district, we got 73 cents back for every dollar we spent. So controlled revenues in that revenue limit do not include other revenues such as per pupil aid. The legislature has been big on doing per pupil aid the past decade because it does not go into the funding formula to try and equalize it throughout the state. Everybody gets the same amount. So this year it's $739 per full-time equivalent student. So for Raymond, that's $233,730. School fees, any fees that we collect are not in the revenue limit. Categorical aids, in other words, aids that are specifically assigned to that category. So library aid has to be spent in the library. Transportation aid has to be spent on transportation. Special education categorical aid has to be spent on special education. So those are outside the revenue limit. Open enrollment tuition revenue is also outside of the revenue limit. So the money that we get for having open enrollment students is not in our revenue limit.
Pete, when do we get the money from open enrollment tuition?
June,
Of the year after?
the end of the
End of the school year you're in.
Correct. Yep. So we've educated them all year, and then we get paid.
So the other district gets that money at the different funding times throughout the year, and then they finally pay.
Correct. Yep, but we do the same. Any kids that are open enrolled out,
Yeah, okay, I get it.
we pay that in June.
Oh,
Revenue, for us though, it's a plus. I mean, we have more coming in than going out, so. In the revenue limit calculation, that includes the base revenue, so in other words, the prior year revenue limit. Membership, which is full-time equivalent resident students. Annual change per member, so if the state government decides that, you know, they want to add a little bit, they can make that change. And then exemptions to the limit, like we've talked about the different exemptions that, open enrollment being one of them. Membership does not mean students in seats. It's a 3-year rolling average, and non-resident open enrolled kids do not count for FTEs. So we get money for them from the other school districts, but they do not count as part of our revenue limit.
So our number this year was 308 for third Friday count. So we don't count, even though we educate 400 students roughly, the open enrollment make up the other portion. And it's not truly 308. 308 is the 3-year rolling average, the average of the last 3 years of enrollment. So the more it goes down, that number will reduce, but it's a much slower reduction because of the 3-year rolling average.
So the calculation, you take your membership, you times it by the maximum revenue per member, and that gives you your revenue limit with no exceptions. And as Mike said, it's a 3-year rolling average, so that, if you are a growing district, yours will go up, and if you are declining enrollment, yours will go down. You know, slower both ways. So revenue limit versus expenses. So revenue limits control the amount of money that a district can raise. We can't raise money above and beyond that. We can't tax higher, and we can't get more aid. The board chooses how they wish to expend those funds. So they can either do a balanced budget, which is typically what happens. You can build fund balance if you have excess, or you spend fund balance if you have expenses that were either unexpected or you have a project that needs to get done. So which levies are inside the limit? So this is why we talked about funds before. Fund 10 is inside the limit. In other words, our Fund 10 can't grow any more than that pie. Fund 38 is inside the limit. That is the non-referendum debt. That is the state trust fund loans that we have. And a capital expansion fund, which we don't have. So those are the three. So 10 and 38 are the two that are in our revenue limit. So when we talk about 80 to 85% of our expenses being in Fund 10, and we can't grow that revenue, that's what limits our ability to run the district. And it's happening in every other district across the state, which is why everybody's going to referendum.
How close were we to, the limit, if you will?
It's in a district's best advantage to go to that limit every year, because if you don't, you'd never get that money back.
Understand, but we obviously aren't at the limits. We're not meeting the limits.
Yes,
Oh, we are.
yes, we will tax to that revenue limit every year. If you don't, you start a spiral down where you will not recover that money. Because you can't go back and say, okay, last year we didn't tax to the limit, so we're going to No, you can't go above that limit, so you are always stuck at that top end.
It's not making sense to me, I guess, but we can talk about it.
You have a pie,
Yeah,
you can eat 3/4 of the pie, but then that other piece of pie is going away, you can't save it for later. Next year, you have another pie.
if we say we've reached our limit, how do you build a fund balance if we've already met the limit?
You can't. You have to ask for more money, you have to go outside of that limit, which is why you go to referendum, because that's the only mechanism we have.
And that's outside the pie.
Correct.
Okay, got it.
All right.
Got it.
Levies outside the limit, Fund 39, so that's referendum money, so that's outside the limit. Fund 80 is outside the limit, you can levy for that without a referendum, and you can tax for that. And uncollectible taxes, so if the municipality has a tax that they couldn't collect, they can invoice us, and then we in turn can charge the difference back to the community the following year.
So if we play this forward, this Fund 80 concept, if we taxed a small amount and we levied for, I don't know, 10 cents to go to a Fund 80, that adds up obviously over time and to the tune of thousands of dollars. Those dollars can be used for some school purposes if it's providing opportunities to everybody in the community. So there's a benefit to us to establishing a Fund 80 account, I think, especially if we talk about engaging our senior community, engaging the community in different learning opportunities that are here, middle school athletics that's available to any kid in Raymond, even if they don't send kids here. So the community-based fund, I think, would be something for us to explore in the future. We're not there right now, there's a lot of other work to be done, but this is one that could, in essence, provide us more, and this is outside of the revenue limit, so it's not part of that other bucket that's fixed. And so it's a benefit for us because it'll also provide the community with an ability to get in here and have access to, you know, elements they haven't had access to, whether it's senior classes or rec classes or other things like that. So communities that have often like recreation centers, or they have rec, you know, a rec guide for the summer for different things, those are often run through Fund 80. My last district had a full workout room that was staffed with people. The staffing for that workout room was available to the community, and they had their own key fob system was available, and that was all paid for out of Fund 80.
But the school can still use it.
Yes.
Correct, it's for anybody in the community.
And we as a district have never even done any of this from future or past administrations. We've never done it?
I'm not aware of that we've ever had a Fund 80,
Okay.
but I'd have to research that.
But it gives you something to build up over time.
Right.
Wow. Okay.
All right, so debt service levies are the Fund 38s and 39s. The board does have a duty to levy the amount necessary for debt obligations, so they have to make sure that the current year principal and interest payments are met through the levy. They can also choose to levy more to accelerate or defease future payments if they so choose. The Fund 80 level levy we've kind of talked about already, but again, remember, if it's unallowed expense, there is a revenue limit penalty for that. So there's two terms that float around. There's a levy and a mill rate, and they're different. The tax levy is the actual number of dollars that the board is raising through property taxes. The mill rate's a math problem. You take the levy, divide it by the property value in the district, and take it times 1,000. That's why it's called a mill, because Latin mill means 1,000. You cannot, well, in this district you almost can, because it's one municipality. But most districts, you can't take your bill right straight from the mill rate.
You said the board sets, on the first bullet point, the
Yep.
board sets the tax levy.
Correct. When you approve the budget in October.
Oh, okay, all right, that's how that gets done.
Yep.
Okay, all right.
So imagine two districts. District 1, you have 500 identical homes, each worth $1 million apiece. So you have $500 million of value in that district. District 2, there's 500 identical homes, each valued $200,000 each. So that district only has a value of $100 million. Okay? Same number of homes, different values. One district is worth 500 million, the other one 100 million. They each levy $1.5 million. So the mill rate on the, let's call it the rich district, has a mill rate of 3. It's $3 per thousand that they will pay on their taxes. In the smaller district, their mill rate's $15 because they have to pay $15 per thousand of value on their house to raise that 1.5 million. So one homeowner's share in the rich district is 0.2% of the entire district. Their property is 0.2% of the entire district's value. They take that times their tax bill of 1.5 million, they pay $3,000. In the other district, their value of their house is also 0.2% of the entire district's value. You take the levy times that, they pay $3,000. So both properties are paying the exact same amount, even though one's mill rate was $3, the other's mill rate was $15. Because it's all based on the property value of the district that you're in. All right, referenda. There's 2 referenda. There's an issue debt. So in other words, you are borrowing money for a specific purpose. A building, a remodel, roof and boiler, whatever the purpose is. The wording of the question is important because that money can only be used for what you specifically worded it for. So you can't say, oh, we got an extra $100,000 left over, let's redo a parking lot. Nope, unless it was in the question, you can't use it. So that's why the wording of a question on issue debt is so important.
This was the most recent 35 million for Union Grove High School. They named quite a few things. Their question was long. It has to be. And so theirs was an issuance of debt different than ours,
Right.
which is a not one time. It's a question for 3 years and then it falls off.
So then revenue authority is when you do a recurring or non-recurring like we are, and it's whatever you need to make your debt payments. You won't know until you actually issue the debt, and that's why you work with a financial advisor to forecast the impacts on that. So now, Dre, we'll get to your question. So when you do operating, there's 2 types of operating referenda. There's a recurring and a non-recurring. So remember, your revenue limit is your base. You start with the base from the year before. So we have the base on the left. You would add the recurring referendum, and that gets added to the base in a recurring, and it goes forever. It never changes. We're not doing that one. We're doing this one. It's an operating non-recurring. So you have our base. You would add the non-recurring referendum for 3 years, and then it falls off again. Year 4. So it has an end. And at year 4, you have to determine what you need to do. Either you have made cuts to get to that point, or most districts go to another referendum at that point.
So it would be safe to say that this is not a blank check.
No, it is not a blank check.
We are writing a check, or the public is writing a check for $750,000 each year for 3 years, and then that check goes away. So it's important for the public to understand, we are not asking for a blank check. There are communities near us, right next door, who have asked for a blank check. And that would be, I think, fiscally irresponsible. And I think this gives us an opportunity to live within our means, the new adjusted means for those 3 years. And then, of course, determine from there where to. And so the question a lot of people may ask is, so what happens after 3 years? Well, we would have enough in our fund balance by giving us the insert of $750 a year for 3 years. 3 years really gets us 5, meaning we really don't start getting down into the danger zone of fund balance again. We would be depleting fund balance.
You're eating it away.
You're greening it away, so it would last 5 years. But we could also talk about Fund 80, establishing some sort of, community desire for this building and facility, which is aging. And we could do a study into the structure, the physical structure of the building, and see if maybe there's a future referendum there for capital. Because a lot of the things, we would be able to tackle some small deferred maintenance projects with the $750 a year, but we would not be able to do, and you're aware of this because you're on the facilities committee, some of those big things, moving the playground, moving the septic, upgrading whole systems here, which would be big spends. That would be something that would have to be determined by community. We'd have a task force that would start up probably in year 2 of this particular cycle, and we'd spend a full year of, hey, what do we need, what do we want, what is the desire, what's the vision for the building. We are going to be doing a strategic plan in May, June, July of this year, regardless of what happens in April, and inviting the community into those conversations to have a public discussion of the future, as Raymond sees it. So regardless, we'll do that. We'll have a survey for the community, we'll have some focus groups, and we'll start to vision that strategic plan, which is a 3 to 5 year plan this summer.
Ray, did that answer your question?
Well, I have added to part of it. So in other words, once you have 3 years, okay, when I sat at a facilities meeting, you guys were talking about a referendum for facilities. So at the end of the 3 years, you could come back to us and say, you want a referendum now for facilities, correct?
You could do that at any time.
If it's a capital project.
So, in other words, so if you get a referendum this year, next year you could ask for a referendum for facilities also?
You could.
Yes.
So where does the spending stop then?
Depends on what the facility is. Are you gonna add on to the building? Are you gonna do some capital project? This doesn't do anything for that.
And that I understand, that's why I'm
Well, we
asking
haven't
about capital.
strategically understand what we're gonna do for the future. That's what Mike was just talking about. Is
Right.
that we're gonna ask the
We've got a
public to
plan.
come in and say, hey, what do we wanna do with this building? Do we want a community center? Do we want other things that are gonna help the community and bring them together?
And if we want certain things, they cost, and so I don't think it would be fiscally reasonable, DeRay, to go to a facilities referendum next year. I think that would be a huge slap in the face to all this whole process. I do think it's fair to say, though, there's bigger stuff out there for us in terms of the build, and you know this, you've been in the meetings, there's bigger projects here. You talk about what's underground or above ground, there's a lot that has to happen for us, a building that is our age of building. But that said, we would have to take our time, study, and determine. Now, if all of a sudden in year 3 we go to referendum, that particular new limit, the new limit could stay. And in a couple of years ago, in 2022, the limit was falling off because we were eliminating debt, and that new referendum would have replaced that, and that was really an opportunity there to lower taxes and get the 14 million, I think it was, 14 million?
Yep.
At the time, but that didn't pass.
But explain, I think, a facility referendum isn't for a one-year thing. That gets spread over a bond, over a number of years. The amount that a taxpayer would be subject to pay is, what's Union Grove?
Significantly less. Union Grove is 54 cents on the
For how many
24,
millions of
for
dollars?
35 million.
Okay, that's
Ours
a
was-
facility referendum.
Right, so the bond is spread out over time.
Yeah, okay.
And, I know that, but I also realize that the referendum we gave to Union Grove, I don't know how many years, it's 10, 20 years or whatever, I know exactly what my taxes are that I'm gonna have to pay for that amount of time. Whereas if you're going like this, it could be increasing every year, every other year,
No.
and never going away.
Not unless you
No.
vote on it.
Right, but I'm
You'd have to
saying,
vote on it again, so
Right.
it's up to
Yeah.
the community to determine whether that, they see
and
that.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, the non-recurring,
Right.
the mill rate on the non-recurring is like 498 next year if it passes, and then it would drop to 496, and then 496 again, so it'll go down slightly, the mill rate that is. So that's a calculation we can quantify for 3 years. Beyond that, you're right, we would have to go, this would fall off, it's not an assumed, amount of money.
Just like
So,
Union Grove could come back for an operational referendum next year
They
if they
could.
wanted to,
Yeah.
right? So like,
Could.
but they're just two different levers.
Correct.
Mhm.
Well, it's the only levers.
Yeah.
I mean, the only way you can raise revenue in a district is referendum. That's it.
And that's when we ask the DPI, okay, we're getting low on funds, what do we do? And their answer is, you have the tool of going to referendum. What if it doesn't pass? You can go again. And so we thought it'd be prudent to at least go, and then it didn't pass, so we made some adjustments to make sure, okay, maybe 4, now we'll go 3. Maybe 3 million, now we'll go 2.25, because we're trying to show that there's a need, and we're trying to be fiscally responsible with things. We've got to build a trust with the community and establish the way this is gonna look over time. So it's, it's an important process. But there are districts that are gonna go, there are districts that are asking 2 questions right now. One facilities, one recurring, which is a forever. I grew up in a town near here. My parents pay $14,000 a year in taxes there. They love it. They're gonna, die in that house. But the reality is they have agreed, that community has agreed to fund hundreds of millions of dollars in additional referendum. That's crazy when you think about it, but that's the world we are in for revenue increases. That's how you increase revenue.
There was a reason we didn't want to go with a reoccurring. My hope is that somebody up in Madison will get their act together and start funding these schools differently, and then we don't have to worry about these operational referendums, that all the schools are funded properly. That's my hope. Hopefully we'll see something
There are
like that
two-
within 3 years.
2 simple changes that could happen that actually wouldn't increase anyone's taxes, and that would be if the state increased the per pupil categorical aid, special ed aid, to 60% from 30%, taxes would not go up. And if they increase the open enrollment amount for an open enrollment student to be the full 11,600, not 8,600, so that 3,000 that the neighboring community that's sending the kid keeps would increase our revenue. Well, we have about 100 open enrollment kids, $3,000, that's $300,000 in revenue increase. That does not increase anyone's taxes. So those are 2 changes that are in discussion, and I brought up to legislators whenever I've had a chance. Pete and I are looking to set up a meeting here soon with a few, but obviously this is part of what the board needs to advocate for as well.
So call your assemblyman.
That's right.
Okay, so state aid is a year behind the revenue limit. So year 1 of a referendum is, the increase is all on the tax levy, and that's why the first year of the referendum is typically the highest mill rate. Years 2 through, in our case 4, depends on where you live in the equalization formula. So we live in a property-rich district, so we are not aided heavily, so a lot of this will go on the taxpayer. If we were in a heavily aided district, then the taxes are not as much as the money they receive, okay? So to answer your question, when you spend more, you get less aid in Raymond. So why we say a referendum grants revenue authority and not taxing authority is because the board has the authority to increase the revenue in the district. And again, referendum is the only way that can happen. So work with your business official, me, and your financial advisor on projections, but be clear that these are projections. I will be conservative in assumptions so that nobody gets surprised, and if anything, we are happily relieved. But tomorrow's reality will not match today's projections, and I think everybody needs to be aware of that. If the state makes a whole bunch of changes, that's not under our control. But what we can control is what we show. So statewide trends versus us here in Raymond. Our district versus the statewide average depends on spending per resident student, property value per resident student. We've talked about the property value. Is there more money in the state aid formula? Who's included in that? But the bottom line is your state aid and the levy will fluctuate regardless of what we do. That's just the nature of school finance. Assessed valuation, this always comes up, so that's why I wanted to throw this in here. You have an assessed valuation on your property and a current market value. Assessed valuation is determined by municipalities. That is not required to be updated every year. That is not how school taxes get their money. School taxes come from current market value, which is determined by the state. Assessed value is determined by the municipality. So the municipality, Village of Raymond, gets their tax money based off assessed value. So when things are reassessed, they re-equalize everybody in the town or in the village. Current market value, especially in the last few years, has just gone crazy, which is why your property that may have been worth $200,000 a year or 3 years ago is now worth $300,000. Because of that influx, the mill rate doesn't change, but more money comes in because, well, not more money comes in, the money's the same. You pay more because your value of property is a higher percentage of the total village property than what it was. We don't get any more money because our revenue is fixed. But people think, well, I'm assessed at $225,000. Yep, that's for the municipal taxes. School taxes come from current market value, and that changes every year by the Department of Revenue.
How do they determine that? They must look at house sales in
Correct.
the area?
Yep.
Okay.
So why is equalized value used to distribute the levy? Because it treats all municipality as though they've been revalued during the year. Department of Revenue goes through and says, yep, your house is this, boom, done. It offsets variances in assessment practices. So in other words, if your town or village doesn't reassess every time they go below 90% like they're supposed to, that doesn't matter. It matters to the municipality, but it doesn't matter to the school. And again, it's updated annually by the State Department of Revenue. All right. So, our revenue limit this year was $3,559,093. We received $1,280,326 in state aid, which is 36% of that. So the property tax levy was $2,278,767. If aid were to go up, the levy would go down. If aid goes down, the levy goes up. Hopefully I've given you some decent information tonight.
Back up one slide.
Repeat, yeah, I was just gonna say, can you back it up? Thank you, that's the
Yep.
screen I was hoping to see.
Yep.
How? The revenue limit is based on that
Membership
Courtney
times,
formula?
yep.
Okay, all right, that's right. And there's no way to really, that's a canned?
Yep.
Kind of a,
Yeah, you can't fudge it.
Okay.
There's no manipulation.
So we as a school district, all we got to help ourselves is the far right.
Even that, you're limited.
Oh, I understand, but I'm just saying, the state isn't, the revenue limit, yeah, it is what it is, but that's all done by formula. That's out of our hands.
Correct, they could change the formula, but yes.
Yeah, but it's out of our district's hands. The state aid, that's out of our hands. That's nothing more we can do there.
Correct.
So to keep this school operating and what it takes to operate, the only way to get there is the tax levy.
To go outside the limit, yes.
Well, I think there's one clarifying point on the revenue limit. If you say that you can't do anything, I think you can, because it's based on resident students. And so ensuring all or most of our resident students attend Raymond is critically important. Right, the more Raymond students that we have open enrolling out absolutely impacts the first number, which is the revenue limit.
Correct.
So we have an ability to influence that.
There's an influence on retaining current Raymond residents, there's
Correct.
also an interest in potentially growing a population in Raymond. So, you know, establishing some sort of growth. And there's discussion
We
of,
all need more kids.
Having more kids, yep.
that's, yeah,
I've done my share.
that's it. My wife's told me enough, that's it.
Yeah.
But that's where there are some things, yes, when it comes to population, because again, you know, more into the formula, because there's more enrolled
Yeah,
students. Now, again, that would also have a difference too, if the open enrollment piece was adjusted, that would also, I think, enter into the equation differently too, as I mentioned before, but,
That would help, yeah.
but we wanna educate the kids who are in Raymond.
Yeah, growing districts don't mind the revenue limit, but then they go to issue debt because they need to build schools because they're growing.
Sun Prairie, good example of this. Every year they build a new school, it seems like, because they're just bursting outside of Madison, just bursting at the seams. At some point, it's got, you know, their expansion's got to stop. But for us, smart growth would be really important. I know the village has had conversations about that as well. That's something that we're committed to examining with the village as possibilities arise.
Yeah.
The other thing we can control, not based on revenue, is expenses. So what we're talking about now is if we want to remain staffed at the current levels, if we want to remain with the current programs and possibilities for kids, then we need max revenue plus. We need a referendum. If we don't get a referendum passed, then we'll have to make adjustments to how much it costs to run this place.
Right.
And you saw 85%, roughly 80 to 85% is people. So when it comes to making changes potentially with a failed referendum, that's where we have our discussion about, you know, what happens if. You know, the school district will be open in fall. There is no doubt about it. It's a matter of what the version looks like, how many people are here, how many people are greeting kids and working with kids, that remains to be seen. And then the problem is beyond next year, there's more that would have to be cut. So it's not just a one-time, hey, we patch, or you know, we failed it and we just failed it and reduced. It's gonna be a diminishing return over the next 3 years without a past referendum. So we would have to cut additional staff, another 1.5 next year. And right now the forecast shows another 1 the following year. So if we cut 4 to 7 staff, and I say that because depending on, every staff has a dollar amount, and some have a higher dollar amount than others with benefits and things like that.
So it's kind of a double-edged sword. To Don's point, let's bring more kids back into the district.
Right.
But if we're not gonna be offering the same services that we're offering today,
Right.
it's gonna be a hard sell to bring them back.
Right.
Maybe even lose more, right?
Correct, that's the unintended consequence is, if we are a reduced program, what's to say someone wouldn't wanna go to a different district touching ours?
Yes.
Through open enrollment, or maybe not move into Raymond. Now, we have added, the good news is we've added a handful of kids in the last month for people who have moved into Raymond, which is great. And so far, they're enjoying their time. So we hope that continues, but right now, that's onesie twosie. And again, it's a 3-year rolling average, so it also takes some time to tick, you know, up on that as well. So it's not, you're not having huge ebbs and flows in your overall budget.
Right.
Yeah,
It doesn't move up quickly either. It moves down slowly and it moves up slowly with that 3-year rolling average. It's a blessing and a curse.
But, back to Don's point, if we were able to bring back the kids that moved out of the district, you would get all of that funding
Correct.
instead of partial. Okay, all right.
The way you had your hand up.
Hypothetically, how would state aid go down?
How would state aid go down next year? Well, what's happening is our state aid's going down because our values have all gone up. So as our values have gone up, the state says, oh, you got it, you can handle it locally, we're gonna give you less. Because the pie is only so much pie.
Well, what about spending? I mean, obviously, if you're gonna be cutting staff and stuff because we have less students, you're gonna be saving money there, so you're
These are
spending
formulas.
less.
There may be some benefit as you cut staff and you have less kids. I mean, it does start to right size. Eventually, if we reduce down, for example, down to 1 section school, that would take, there was an argument about open enrollment, for example. If you did away with open enrollment kids, which we are not doing for those that are watching the live stream. But if you you did that over 8 years, you'd see your population shrink, your overall cost would shrink, your overall tax, I mean, it would shrink everything. The problem is you'd have a school that's shrinking down from 400 to roughly 200, 220, and you have the equivalent of what they have around here, which are small schools. Not a bad thing. They work well, they produce, but it's not what Raymond is right now, which
You
is
don't balance your classroom
400
sizes that
kids.
way very
Well, you don't with one section.
That percentage though would be pretty similar.
Because I attend the village board meetings, and most of the people that are coming in to this district are 50 and older.
Right.
So you're not bringing in any more younger people because the value of the land is too high for somebody who's younger to build with a family.
When you're selling five-acre properties,
Yep.
I mean, they're beautiful. But again, I wasn't able to afford that when I was 22, 24, 28. I still can't.
You don't get the student help to get the tax levy going.
Yeah, but people aren't buying the properties to build. The building in this community has gone down so drastically in the last 4 years because people can't afford to build.
Oh, that's true.
Sure.
Can I just like reply?
I don't have a 35. I've got a 34 and a 36.
I have a question. So there's, how many open enrolls? I can't.
Do you remember what it pertained to?
It's a referendum. I don't know if you, after this one.
Oh, I took that one out because it was similar to this one.
Okay, because, yeah.
Oh, you skipped-
What was up with
You
that?
skipped the one, it was so good.
I edited it
Okay.
because it's
Okay.
similar to this one.
Which is positive aid versus negative aid, which is private
Yep.
aid.
Can you explain when or who we get our... Oh, I'm sorry.
Do you have a question?
Oh, I did. How many, I think I know this, but how many open enroll students go out of Raymond?
Right now, I think we are at, I want to say 37 students out. There's 123, so it's like a net of 90, roughly 87-ish. So it's the largest number that it's been. We have a lot of kids that we're losing out in the school district. So to rekindle those conversations, to point me in the direction of people, to help start the conversation again wouldn't be harmful to try and figure out ways to retain our Raymond folks. You had a question, Audrey?
My question was, so we have the peaks of January, February, April, August, and June being the special ed
Mhm.
payment. Where are the funds coming from, like January and February?
State,
Is it
the
local?
municipality. No, the municipality's tax revenue.
Okay. April?
Tax revenue also.
Well,
Slide 14. That was 14 in this one.
No, it should be 14. I think I only deleted 2 slides.
Right there.
That one.
Yep. Audrey, on the word line.
It's just a little chart right here.
oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Equalization aid, that's the state aid, right?
That is state aid, yep.
Okay, I see it, the special ed. Stated, all right, good.
Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you. Let's give a round of applause to Pete Kempen. Thank you. It's a mic drop moment for you. A little bit of information I have here, if I could. Don't drop the mic, because that one will probably work and give us feedback of some kind. As we work into the referendum, I wanted to share a few things just about our communications. The mailer just went out. Many people in this room may have received it. We are in the process of working with the post office to make sure everybody gets it that needs it. But there was one mailer that went out last week through direct mailer. And then there will be a second mailer that goes out. So this is the mailer here that went out. Probably saw that. There we go. It's got your yes and no on it. The other referendum postcard that will be going out, that's the same one. This is the second postcard that will be going out in the coming weeks, just prior to early voting. Again, this is a helpful chart for people. We are working on hopefully getting an app calculator that actually allows you, so we're seeing if we can get that slick set up on our website that you can punch in your value on, but sometimes the widgets are not exact, and it's hard because then people will say, I punched it in exactly, and it's not exact, but we'll do our best. There's one on a couple of local districts around us that are doing referendum, and it's very helpful, but again, it can be tricky because if not set up properly, it could be a mess. So again, this mentions your early voting. This has your chart of what the impact is, some other information here, and then our plan for utilizing funds, a little bit about, what goes into the buckets of funding, as well as our graph. So again, just some useful tools here. We have a Raymond Referendum booklet that we are creating. This booklet will be available to people. We're having it printed, and you can have it for those discussions with people in your communities, hopefully. And it just gives you a good overview of our school and district, a little history, where we sit compared to our peers. Raymond's doing well, getting results. Looking at Wisconsin referendum and the nature of referendum. Looking at a little bit of our funding and how it works. It kind of goes through a little bit of that information. Why Raymond? Why are we looking at this particular instance of our needs? And again, outlines a little bit about our system, costs of operation, declining enrollment, increased education costs. So again, kind of shows you some of the basic costs of schools is outpacing the district resources. Sort of that inflationary discussion. And then our budget reductions, these are things we've done already to cut costs, because we did have a year last year where we discovered this financial issue. And so freezed, we gotta probably change that to froze, right? Probably would be accurate. Again, some of the things that we've done to reduce our costs. One of the things we did in the most recent this year is we are thankfully curbing a lot of our costs for legal fees and attorney costs, but that still remains to be seen as we navigate things. And of course, health insurance, there's a tipping point where we ask our employees to pay more out of their pocket, and that's fine, but there's a certain point where the benefit doesn't become much of a benefit if you're paying more and more on the staff side. So then this outlines a past referendum and the specifics around each of those items. I think it allows you to have some good talking points. And again, board members, neighbors, whomever you'd like to have this in their hands, there'll be color copies. We found a guy who does it pretty reasonably down the street, so we'll have those printed. Again, information sharing about the passing, what a failed referendum does, and names off a number of things that we've discussed, from cutting staff to cutting back different opportunities to eliminating various things that unfortunately redoing our master schedule wouldn't allow for. Because as part of this, how do we find a way to have less teachers and the same amount of kids, a different master schedule? So everyone's, in a school setting, anyone that works in a school knows that's kind of a nightmare, because master schedule, the bane of our existence. If there was a perfect one, we would have it, and none of us do. So we have one we like now with block scheduling, longer blocks of time for learning, but we'd have to go to a traditional block. Usually that goes from 80 minute to 40 minute. So there's reductions and, you know, changes that occur with changing to a master schedule like we would have next year. Different cuts. Teachers would be teaching beyond certifications potentially and losing prep time. What I mean by that is teachers are certified in certain areas and there's a shortage. So it's really hard to find teachers, let alone teachers in specific niche things we offer. You know, so not everyone can just teach health class, for example. And so if we have a teacher that needs to teach health but doesn't have a license, then we'd have to ask that teacher to get a license. And many in our building have said to me, I'll do whatever I have to do to stay at Raymond because they like it here, they want to continue here, but we've got to be creative in that a little bit with teachers as we face this possibility. And then losing traditions, I mean, there's a lot of great things. Class sizes are reasonable, field trips are, you know, good experiences we have that are a shared cost. Those would be altered, if not eliminated. And then of course the number 7 is people may decide, staff may decide to leave. Which is a result of, you know, I guess you could say death by 1,000 cuts. It's one of those things. So why are taxes going up? Talks a little bit about mill rate, about how it's dropped. Talks a little bit about what it would look like across 3 years here of new mill rate if passed. Then it has the impact on taxes, broken down by annual and monthly. For the cost of 5 cups of Starbucks, you can see how this impacts. Cost of educating the future, this is just a little, you know, article that talks about why not pay for Raymond schools, because if you have taxes and you're paying, everyone pays school tax. It would be nice if the taxes you pay would go to the school you drive past versus the school that's down in the neighboring community, and then you take on their tax profile. So if you went to a neighboring community, our school would have to assume their profile. And why would that happen? Well, over time, again, if the school reduces enough, there's not a program left. And so, again, why not fund the school we have here, which is this is a very heavenly picture of Raymond that we have here with the light behind. Heather, you should start to use that in your stories, because the one you had is a little old. It's like the gun slit windows, those little tiny windows that were on the old windows. They were the little window picture. So,
I can send it to you.
yes, I will. This is the budget including referendum, so this is a chart we've pushed around that shows the bump for people who like to look at numbers charts. It also talks a little descriptive there about narrative about those charts. And then it also, without referendum, is a scenario where we cut and lose staff, and it describes that whole phenomena. And then there's the question on the ballot. So this is one of our flip books we had talked about as well. And then we'll also get some posters and signage. This is a signage that'll be up in the lobby here over by the atrium and the sports as people are coming through. What does a referendum mean for us? And these are really the big 6 talking points that'll be provided. So trying to get the information out to help people understand what's going on and how it all works. So the other piece is I've shared with the board, there's some key messaging through social media that we'll be pushing out over the next 4 weeks, because it's pretty quick here. So there's some of that that's going to be happening, and just wanted to make you all aware of that. We have 3 daytime sessions. Our first is after senior breakfast this week, 9:30. We'll be having a meeting probably in the atrium, because this room will be getting ready for lunch just after senior breakfast. So the atrium will walk anyone who wants to go down there. It'll normally would start in the office, but we've got a larger group with senior breakfast. Hopefully they'll stick around. We'll have a presentation for those people who want to hear it. And the next 3 Wednesdays, we have that same, so Wednesday, 9:30, we have a coffee session. And then evenings, we have 3 evening sessions. One is Thursday this week at 6 p.m. here. One is next Wednesday at 5 p.m. here. And the last one is the 20th, which is 6 p.m. here. So again, trying to get people to come and ask questions. Anyone at any time that has questions can email me, call me, stop in, any one of us would gladly talk. And I know you've had people too that have run into you, board members as well. So feel free to, point them in my direction or take on the call or question yourself. So this is kind of where we sit with all of our stuff for the referendum, with your marketing materials, etc. I do want to point out that, when we go to referendum, there's a cost. This costs time and this costs money, and printing things and mailing things costs money. There are attorney's fees that are associated with referendum work. Our attorney's fees so far for this particular question are right around $3,000. The last referendum question was right around $3,000. We're working with Allison Buchanan, who is the chief person with this in charge, in the area, and she's excellent, but at the same time, it costs money. So when we do these kinds of things, these are all things that affect our overall bottom line. So it's not prudent for us, Doré, to continually forever ask for referenda, because it's just not going to be good.
Put this online rather than print it?
We're going to be having, all the resources will be online, and there will be some print versions of it. This will be a poster, so.
But the pamphlet you were talking about?
Yes.
When will that be available?
I'm hoping to get that printed, and that'll be available online hopefully tomorrow. So we're looking to enhance our referendum web
'Cause
presence.
I'm just thinking cost-wise, it's easier to put it on the website for those of us who don't want to come to the school to pick it up.
Oh, for sure. But for some people are asking, like, hey, when I'm out and about, can I at least have something to show someone? As we start to emerge from our homes after this winter, I think it's nice to see our neighbors once in a while, but sometimes not. So yes, we certainly will have, we're not making a ton of copies. We're making, I think, 100 booklets total. So printing them off and getting them at a reasonable rate. I think we have a rate of $2.46 per book bound, color, which isn't too bad. So again, there's a cost to those things, but we've got to keep those things down. We're doing this marketing and stuff ourselves. Other communities that have referenda, sometimes the ones that are big building referenda, have marketing firms and construction companies that back their campaigns. We don't have that. So we're doing this on our own, and I want to thank our team. Zoe Rodriguez does a great job in this program. Rebecca Brockman does a great job. Donna Leadership, Allie's done a great job of trying to keep up with all the various postings and things we put out. So it takes a village, but Lindsay Capone's been great as well in the front office. So just trying to get this all underway and information shared with people is hard, but important. So that's what I have for referendum update.
Okay. Any questions? Any more questions? Okay. Well, I guess that concludes our workshop for tonight. So is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned at 6:52.
Just want to note that we'll have our candidate forum starting at 7 p.m. So we'll get set up here a little bit. For the candidates, we'll move the tables a little bit here. I understand some people may decide to exeunt, but otherwise, thanks for coming.